Hello, my name is Marc Jeffrey, and you are listening to episode 18 of the Marc Jeffrey Podcast Show, brought to you by MPC Solutions. Yo, what's up, podcasters? Episode 18 of the Marc Jeffrey Podcast Show. Marc Jeffrey here on the 21st of June 2017, and it is indeed summer solstice evening. Now, I'll say that again. It is indeed summer solstice evening. So if you're a druid or a pagan, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining me. And we've got a cracking show lined up for you this week. Last night, I had an interview with a sound engineer from Plymouth over in Devon, and his name is Danny Blackaller, and he's going to be telling us what he's been getting up to, what he gets up to, and what he's looking forward to in 2017. We've got two songs sent in to us from Sean and McLaren from Shameless Promotions. The first song that we're going to be playing in a second is a song from a band called A SHORELINE DREAM, and the song is called Room for the Others. And then later on, right at the end of the show, we got a song from a band from Brooklyn, I think they are, and the band is My Favourite Things, A Little Closer. So two cracking tunes from Sean there that I'm going to share with you. So we'll move straight on. Here it is, A SHORELINE DREAM, Room for the Others, and then coming up after that, we have Danny Blackaller in the studio talking sound engineering. in the studio this week, we have somebody very, very cool. I'm not even going to attempt his name. I'm going to leave it up to you. Your name is, sir?
It's Danny Blackaller.
Blackaller, that's it. Oh, you'll have to forgive me, mate. You know, I am absolutely terrible with names. But thank you for coming in at very, very short notice, mate. I wouldn't say I've been let down today. More of there's been a couple of people that were supposed to come in, and one thing another, life calls and that lot, you know, they were unable to turn up. But thank you very much for coming in at very, very short notice. How's your week been?
It's been quite all right. And then all of a sudden it gets quite warm and it gets even better.
Very warm.
Very warm.
We're not used to this sort of weather here in the UK, are we?
No, we're not. Not at all.
I've had a bit of a crazy week, to be fair. Last Friday, I told my listeners that I started up Taekwondo. Oh. Right? 40 years of age, and I've just taken up Taekwondo. My eldest, Zach, he's 6, and he's just started doing Taekwondo. And I was going to start doing boxing just to get my fitness up and that. And Nikki, she kind of pushed me in the direction of doing Taekwondo with Zach because she thought that it would, you know, have something that we can do together, which is ideal, but it's bloody hard work, I tell you.
Yeah. Well, obviously you've got all the legwork that is involved in that. And it's, you know, it's going to be very, very hands-on. It's a very sophisticated martial art. I mean, when I was 11, I did Shotokan karate, and
brilliant.
It wasn't as physically aggressive as compared to Taekwondo, but it was, you know, aggressive in more emotional sense. It was all about a sense of discipline, and you know, it had a much more solid history as it dated back to a Japanese master in the 16th or 17th century. It kind of just grasped from there, and yeah, it's great to learn how to kick someone's butt.
Well, I've always wanted to do martial art, and I've always had an excuse. I've always, you know, because I thought about doing it from the age of 16, 17, and I was like, no, I'm not doing it now. I'm too old, and I've put it off, and now my son wants to do it, and he's age 6, and I've been pushed a little bit, and I thought, well, now I've actually got a good excuse to start, you know, and thought 40 isn't an old age to learn. I've still got about 6 years to get to me black belt stage.
Well, yeah, well, that's the great thing about loved ones. They will sometimes push you in directions you didn't really think of, but then you'll be pushed in another direction and realize, well, actually, this fits me just fine. So what they said actually was the right thing in mind. So thanks.
It's been one of those weeks where I've done stuff that I wouldn't normally do, and it is good to be scared, if you know what I mean. Like I said, I started Taekwondo, and then on Sunday I went and done a bit of weather reading for Radio Plymouth FM.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that. Like, when you are, I suppose when you read a weather report, actually you just make simple calculations. But when you're dealing with so much detail, what is that like to have to keep it so scripted and to the point, whilst also trying to be informative? You get what I mean?
Yeah, well, it was as easy as basically sitting in a chair and having it all in front of me, and all I had to do was read it. That was basically what I was quite surprised, because it's not as glamorous as what it sounds. What happened, as Jeffrey would say, is Nikki, there was a competition sort of thing before Christmas. Well, it was an auction, actually, where you bidded on a studio tour. And Nikki won the studio tour, and it said you may have the chance to read the weather. And that's basically what it was. So, and because I had a foot operation after Christmas, I wasn't able to go down until this weekend, really. So I went and had a look around the studio, and I met the brilliant guys down there. And then at the end of it, it was the chance for me to read the weather. And I've done such a good job. I've had some really, really good feedbacks, and they're going to push me in some directions, possibly, hopefully, fingers crossed.
Well,
so it's getting in the studio, and it's getting in there, isn't it?
It's very exciting. For those who don't know, Mark and myself, we've come from a radio background. I myself was a broadcast engineer for an online radio outlet for 3 years. It started in back in my university studies. A friend of mine was telling me that there was this online radio station setting up, and I was thinking, ooh, that's interesting. So I spoke to the assistant director of that particular operation, said I wanted to get involved. And so I started working with TJs over the next 3 years, created some really great relationships. Mark and I were just talking about a few shows we knew, John Digital, Battle Stations, Root Street, all great shows, all supported with the local scene. And out of that, I eventually then went into more corporate work, and now I'm doing video sessions with bands. It's kind of been an interesting twist of things. Suddenly, one minute I'm doing radio, the next thing I'm doing theatre and stuff. And then, because beforehand, doing anything like this, where it's live and it's in motion, it's like it's a rack to the system. And then all of a sudden, these other opportunities came up, and I was like, I can actually do this now.
It's cool, man. Like I said, I started up this sort of work about 3 or 4 years ago now. It's really, really rushed through. It's really gone quite quick, And I started off, like you say, Eat Music. That was a station that I started off with. I don't know about yourself. And it's led to some good things. Like I say, I presented a show there called Remember the 90s, and then I went over to another station from Cornwall called NCB Radio. And now I'm basically freelance doing podcasts, and I'm in the process of setting up something nice, shall we say? So it's all good. But we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. This weather, what do you think of this weather? Are you enjoying it?
I am indeed. I just think it was getting a little bit too intense. But then I remember Italy and Spain and Morocco and other countries like that looking at us right now and thinking, oh, please. Like, this is the kind of weather we get every day. Since when do you start complaining? All you get all year is rain.
Yeah, well, you see, now I know where you're coming from here now, because over here in the UK at the moment, guys, we're getting a bit of a heat wave at the moment. Currently, is around between about 27 and 30 degrees, which for the rest of the world isn't huge. It isn't massive. But I was on my post round today, and I was absolutely sweating buckets. And in the garden was this little Italian bloke who's on my round, and he was like, "Here, you guys, you can't handle the heat." And I was just like, "No, I know. We're not a country designed for snow. We're not a country that's designed for heat. We're a country that's normally around 22, 23 degrees." And then I just suddenly thought, yeah, well, we're not designed for the heat. But then what this guy, what he didn't realise is that in Italy, when it gets really, really hot mid-afternoon, they shut up shops, they shut up the houses, they put the blinds down, and they go and have a kip for 2 or 3 hours. And that time that he was talking to me was the midday siesta time, when I was actually working my bloody ass off.
Yeah, it's the same in Spain. And again, it's called the siesta, and it's kind of perfectly normal. And yet we in the UK, we always wonder why we're such a hardworking nation. It's because we're working at the same time.
We're sweating our asses off.
Yeah,
when they're normally in bed.
Yeah, when they're normally in bed, exactly. And it's kind of we have a very interesting combination of weather, but yet in comparison to, say, Scandinavia, it's acid rain and all that stuff, we get the best of both worlds in all 4 seasons.
Yeah, so it's bloody hot over in the UK at the moment. I think that it's supposed to be, as the week goes on, it's supposed to be getting a little bit cooler. We're supposed to be getting some thunderstorms coming in either tonight or tomorrow night, which is kind of interesting. I hope that they're like those thunderstorms that we had the other week. Did you see those storms that we had?
I didn't see them, but I heard them, and then from when I heard them, I realised spring was well and truly over.
It's crazy. I mean, I've never seen anything like it. I don't even know how to describe it. It was just continuous flashing from the lightning, fork lightning, sheet lightning, and it was just continuous rumbling of thunder around the valley here.
Yeah, well, I was in the United States about 3 weeks before Hurricane Irene, and almost every night it was rainstorms one way or another. So by the time you were thinking about, I want to have some dinner, there's a massive storm in the lead up to a hurricane. And it was pretty scary stuff, I'm not going to lie. Just because 1 minute it would just be nonstop thunder. The next minute it would be the odd flash of lightning. When it got to the later evening, I was on a beer run, and all of a sudden I was seeing these massive lightning shows within the clouds from at least maybe a mile or a mile and a half away. And it was massive. And then the following day, I was just going to get some cash in a cash machine, and then all of a sudden, easily 4 inches of rain came down on me. I've never had so much rain come down in my life, even for something as simple as withdrawing a few dollars.
It's amazing. I've had about 3. I mean, I hate to think what my water bill is going to be like this week, because I've had 3 showers today. I mean, I got up this morning, cold shower, come home from work, cold shower. Before I come to pick you up, cold shower. My body just can't handle this heat. I actually think that it's possibly the start of the end. I think it is the end of the world. I think it's coming. There's lots of crazy stuff. Tories and the DUP, Brexit, Trump, all the stuff that's going on over in Syria, Russia, North Korea. Crazy times. I've never known anything like it.
Yeah, but I think, as I find almost all the time, not just on an individual basis, but when you look at the ongoing events in the world, you need to have the person willing to go into the storm and make something work. I mean, I don't want to focus so much on Syria, but I'm going to use it as an example here. You got something like this Syrian Democratic Forces and the fact that they are being essentially trained now to fight and going into very, very hellish conditions when most of the superpowers are trying to keep their distance in an ever-growing proxy war. And even though Syria has its fair share of sectarian tensions, obviously, they would not be going into such ugly firefights as we have seen on the news if they didn't have perseverance. And that is key to fighting wars.
So we'll start right at the beginning then. As people at home may be aware, you're a sound engineer. How did you actually get involved in sound engineering? We like I said, we started off at Eat Music, you and me. You done your own show then, did you? Was you a presenter? Was you an engineer?
I was an engineer, so I was responsible for the technical and physical, practical responsibilities of the radio station, and for at least 3 shows a week, which at any point would go up or down depending on whether engineers could show up or anything like that. But before that was like the 3rd phase of my engineering career. It started all the way back in secondary school when I was studying IT. And then all of a sudden but this was before GCSE. I dabbled in music technology at GCSE, and this teacher called Toby really brought the subject to life for me. And I really wanted to dig into that as much as I could. However, it was a brief period because I found that I had more technical skill than creative music skill. This came forward when I eventually did my A-levels and ultimately failed them, but I still wanted to persevere. So my mum showed up to me one day and told me about this course that was going to Deep Blue Sound. And I was like, this might be a good chance for a fresh start. So I did that. And the first year was really, really challenging, really difficult, but something clicked and it finally came together. And I went from BTEC, which is an A-level related, right through to my degree, and then eventually went into Eat Music.
Eat Music. I'm not here to slag them off, because I'm not going to slag them off, because they got me started and I am where I am today because of them. But it was very challenging, wasn't it?
It was a very challenging experience for the both of us. I mean, in my later years, it became clear that the structure that was once there had dissipated over time. Bearing in mind, this assistant director I was mentioning earlier, he moved to Hong Kong to work on films and corporate films in Asian companies. Because of that, I think it was a devastating loss of the management element of Eat Music, and as a result, that had to change. That change, I think, was felt by both engineers like myself, DJs like yourself, Mark, and everyone that was involved, even guests, because the management was coming in every now and again, making sure we were all right, making sure engineers were trained, etc., etc. And over time, that kind of relationship became strained. And for me, it got strained to the point where it's just like, I couldn't do this anymore. So I eventually left. Ironically, because I had filled in for someone on a great show called the Plymouth Punchline, I got the chance to not so much work, but to talk to a guy there called Peter. And he was telling me that he was doing loads of corporate video stuff. And he was like, would you be more interested in doing this kind of thing? So we met shortly after I quit, and we had a really good dialogue. And then I started doing corporate videos for what was at the time BCQ Art Productions. So I worked with charities and businesses. And then eventually I kept in touch with a mentor of mine called Stu Welsh, and he opened up Belief Space Studios to me, and I did the band session with Black Tree Sons, and it kind of just, it happened in phases, and those phases have led me to where I am today.
So we was talking about Eat Music, wasn't we? We didn't know whether it was still going around or not now, but it was, like you say, it was a good platform for us to start going on. Do you miss radio at all?
I do indeed. And since my time at music, I've been wanting to try and get back in. I applied to BBC Radio Devon. I did a bit of training with them. And that was really exciting. I mean, I wasn't expecting such a response, but because I had a back channel, I managed to get the opportunity to try out as a broadcast engineer. So I did some training with them in December a few years ago, mainly through their like web-based kind of training program, because a lot of their stuff was internet-based at the time. Bearing in mind that the new station where they are now was under construction, it seemed that kind of transitional period was having an effect, and they couldn't keep me on any longer. So since then, I've been trying to reach out to different outlets, and I'm still keen to hopefully get back into radio at some point. But
how about podcasting? Have you thought about doing anything with like podcasting? Do you listen to any podcasts?
I don't personally listen to podcasts. I haven't listened to podcasts for years, but it is certainly an avenue that I have considered in the past. However, I've been focusing more on creating what's called video updates, basically vlogs.
Yeah.
To keep track of, as the whole video session thing has kind of grown and my activities have gone here, there, and everywhere, I've now decided to do regular video updates, usually every 2-3 months, but I might be trying to look to increase that. It basically is a visual filling in of everything that's going on with me, with upcoming sessions and everything else. So that's kind of my podcast, but it's kind of a video cast, shall we say.
Yeah, because like I say, you are a sound engineer. You work from home. I take it you've got your own studio at home.
Yeah.
How did that go about setting up then? Because I mean, like I say, I'm trying to set up a bit of a studio here myself, and it's it costs a lot of money.
It does.
It takes a lot of time. How's it going?
Well, all these years ago when I was studying, the studio and my bedroom were one and the same. And a lot of students like myself will always start from that phase, the bedroom studio phase, which nowadays could be little more than a laptop, a cheap copy of Logic, and an odd keyboard here or there. So I started from that kind of phase and kind of developed into where I am now, where my studio is now separate from my bedroom. And I can, all my post-production, editing, and mixing work is done from there. Because we moved into a new house and we had the spare room, and my parents weren't too sure what they wanted to do with it because they couldn't realistically see a bedroom. And then my father actually said that this might be a good idea to kind of develop this area into a studio. And I looked at it and I thought, well, at least I can create this into, because I don't really call it home studio. It's more like a project studio where I do the video updates. I do all my mixing and my editing there. But space is still a limitation for me. So I work from outside studios with bands because I need that space, those resources that are there. And I'm hoping to kind of expand on that, because what I'm really trying to do is to try to expose myself to different technologies, different spaces, different resources, which is why now I'm working out of a studio just outside of Newton Abbot and just in the South Hams. I've been starting to do stuff from there. I did a session with Skyborn there recently, which was really good. There's a couple more from bands up in that kind of direction soon. Just keep embracing that kind of challenge. I'm looking for somewhere in Cornwall as well at the moment. So, because the traditional sound engineers per se has a studio to work from. I feel like I'm taking that a little bit differently by working from different studios.
That sounds good.
It does sound good, and it does sound very interesting.
You're almost like a mobile mechanic sort of situation, isn't it? Where your home is your editing studio where you do your editing work, but you are working for a band or a solo artist, and you go to their studio that they normally use, and you are their man, sort of thing.
Yeah,
on those sort of lines, is it?
Yeah, it is essentially, and I suppose it's accommodating for my needs. And this whole idea of going to studios in this way 10 years ago for me would have been completely unheard of. You would have told me that and I wouldn't have believed you. Primarily because bigger studios were still making decent business, and the whole thing with Napster had yet to erupt, and then all of a sudden the whole Napster thing happened with MP3s, and then all of a sudden commercial studios started to die out, and smaller studios are finding it hard to generate business. So they opened their doors to other engineers like myself, and in the Southwest over the last 6 years, I was able to get some really great opportunities at studios up and down the region. And since then, I've been still exploiting my contacts to kind of try out different studios, different atmospheres, work with different bands, and just, getting more experience as and where I get it.
Which direction do you think the music industry is going in? Because it's changing one hell of a lot. I mean, if we look at Plymouth, for instance, our local city here I live in Cornwall. Danny lives in Devon, but it's the biggest city to us. The music industry in Devon has changed one hell of a lot. I mean, you've got a lot of pubs closing down. We've got a lot of music venues closing down. Somebody told me the other day that they thought that the Hub was in the process of closing down. I don't know if you know anything about that, but obviously the music industry in the Southwest, UK, is changing. And how far can it go before there's nobody playing music anywhere at all? Can you ever see it happening? I mean,
I don't think there will, because what I've seen over the last 6 months is that if one place goes down, they'll go set up somewhere else. And to answer your question earlier, the White Rabbit did actually close recently, and the remaining elements of that, notably Dan James, the main promoter there, now works from the Junction.
That's right, yeah.
Great guy, great promoter. So in that kind of retrospect, the kind of scene from the White Rabbit is still alive and it's still active. They've just found somewhere else. And if circumstances within the city means that it's going to be focused more towards student flats, restaurants, even cinemas and crazy stuff like that, the local music, there will still be bands, even just a handful of bands that will still want to play. There'll still be a handful of DJs still wanting to do their thing. They're going to find someplace one way or another. And I think there is an opportunity there. But as I know from a few contacts of mine, that's also a bear trap. Because I was speaking with a DJ a few years ago whilst still at Eat Music. And we was saying that a DJ friend of his, a promoter, was had the opportunity to buy a venue out. And he went and did it, put some money towards it. And then over time, it became a massive debt on its back, and he just couldn't keep it running. But eventually it reached the point where he just had to keep it running in order to survive, as well as to keep track of things. And then he was telling me that his friend was essentially trapped in that kind of persona. But that was down to the fact it was the wrong person running that venue. I think if you find the right person and the right promoter, I think you can get a venue and a place where bands can feel like they can really go out there and give it their all and create a fan base. Because that is one of the main reasons why a band will promote a venue, why a DJ will go to a certain club, to develop a culture and a fan base, and to basically receive reception from that particular genre of music, or several genres of music, just a hub of music there to be. And I think if the corporate establishment of Plymouth, let's say, if they want to focus all their energy on cinemas and restaurants, I think it's going to be a regrettable mistake, because there is a culture in Plymouth and it needs to be kind of just like elsewhere, and it just needs to be accommodated for. Not much, just a hub for there to be a vibrant cultural atmosphere.
Yeah. I mean, it's bloody hot in here, isn't it? I tell you what, I think we've probably lost about a stone in weight each in this last half an hour talking about it.
I think I've lost at least 4 stones just in the last 3 hours.
I can feel another shower coming on, not necessarily with you, but I can feel another shower. So, like you say, you are a sound engineer. What are you doing at the moment then? If people want to get hold of you, if they're a band or a solo artist that would like you to do some work for them, whereabouts can they find you?
They can find me at the Facebook page, Danny Blackaller Sound Engineer. All my video work goes through that. Got loads of great sessions all the time. They're constantly being shared and posted everywhere. You can't miss them. Aside from the video stuff, I offer recording and mixing. I already have an EP in the works with a well-known acoustic artist that's coming out really soon, hopefully. And it's just constant from that. So it's basically just go like that page and just keep in track.
You do quite a lot of stuff on YouTube as well, don't you?
Yeah, I do. I do have a YouTube channel where I'm posting the video updates, but I'm now bumping that over into Vimeo, which is a HD video website. It has a really good HD kind of quality standard to it, and I'm going to be posting stuff on there. So I'm still going to have material on YouTube, but I'm now going to have an outlet on Vimeo as well. So that's really exciting. I'm looking forward to that.
Check it out, guys, because it's pretty damn fun. I've seen some of his videos, and it's really, really good. It's good to see a lot of local artists, getting involved with you and taking it to the next level. So what does 2017 hold for you then? What have you got coming up in your life very, very soon?
Well, there is... Where do I start? So far, 2017 has had loads of really good artists. Recently, there's been a great Exeter-based band called King of Souls who got the chance to win, essentially, a session with me. So we did that, and that was fun. And we're in the process of releasing... We've already released 2 songs. We've got another song on the way, a song called Two Roads, which is a very ballady kind of song, which was also a very physical song for the band as well. Because we were in the studio and we were, going into song number 3, and all of a sudden, like, the guitarists were freaking out about a solo bit just in the bridge. Bearing in mind they'd already practiced the song, they knew it back to front, but yet the lead guitarist wasn't sure about a harmony part. So I think they spent about 2-3 minutes. Ironically, at the same time, I was dealing with a camera that basically just died for some reason.
Any goddamn things.
So we used it as a creative opportunity. I was downloading a camera. They were sorting out a part. But yet once they did, it was really, really 90s. Like, when you hear this solo bit in the actual video, it does take you back to those kind of 80s, 90s Guns N' Roses like ballads.
Great.
It just goes there. Because a lot of their influences come from that hair metal 90s kind of metal scene like Guns N' Roses and Aerosmith and whatnot.
So when you get a band in the studio and you're setting up, can you kind of guess whether they're going to be a pain in the ass or whether it's all going to go smooth?
You can never tell, but you prepare for every circumstance. You just have to be constantly on standby and aware, not so much of the equipment, although you do keep an eye on that, but you also keep an eye on people, because you don't want to be putting people in unnecessary situations. And to keep the band focused is hugely important. But half the time, because they're so used to playing with each other and being around each other, that's easy. However, when you've got a younger band, like I did with Quorum, that integrity can get easily lost because of... Well, in particular case, it was a particular song. It was freshly written. They'd only practiced it a hand bunch of times. And it was quite clear to me that things were it was on the verge. So we literally got 2 more takes down, and we decided just to leave it at that because it was just so intense. Mainly because of the guitarist, because he was struggling really hard to persevere. Not so much because of the parts, because everybody thinks, guitar parts are so bloody complicated, But it's not so much about that. It's having to play those parts repetitively for a 5-minute cycle. And for someone, for an older teenager, it can get really stressful. And I could tell that. So their manager and I, we mutually agreed along with the band that that was that. So for me, it's always making sure people are accommodated for, because you are dealing with human beings at the end of the day. And it's also, it's important to keep them fed, alive, keep them happy. Because
it can be a daunting place, can't it?
It's a daunting place, yeah.
I noticed that because with my show, remember the 90s that I used to do, we used to have bands coming in and doing a 90s cover. We had a lot of bands that played on the music scene every single week that have been going for years. But we also had bands with younger people come in, bands that hadn't been going for very long. I had a couple of solo artists that had never, ever played live at all, And when they come into a studio, I mean, it wasn't a big professional studio, but it looked pretty good at what it was above the roundabout. when they come into that studio, it can be a very, very daunting place. And I found as a presenter, the first thing you've got to do is ground them. You know, get them a drink, sit down, have a chat to them, keep it going, keep the chat going, and then, you know, get them to play something, and then have a little bit more of a chat to them, and just basically ground them and make them feel like, you know, it's not such an intimidating place as what a studio can be, because it can be a very intimidating place.
Ironically, in my time in same said place, even guys from comedy and theatre need that as well. There was one particular show, it was a comedy show. You know, it was quite late at night. So at this point I was already going to be quite exhausted anyway, but yet they were coming in all of a sudden with these music instruments, and I was thinking, what's going on here? And then I realized quickly that they were going to play a song, and then they eventually told me, oh, we're going to play this song and this song, so can you set this up? Ironically, I had some of my own mics on me at the same time, so we kind of stuck to the script of how we normally did things, because we already done a few shows by this point over like the last few weeks. So we kind of kept to the script for like the first half of the show, and then during a song break we set up for this musical bit that they were going to perform live. And it was, I think I did have some, to be fair, I had some notice of it, because we regularly spoke on Facebook and they basically gave me some indication. So I packed a few mics just to be on the safe side. But it's one of those situations that you don't realize how big it is until you actually see it. And yet, when we did actually get around to playing that particular bit, it was some of the best radio that I'd done easily, primarily because of how creative they are. And when you're dealing with comedians, kind of actor folk, you expect that creativity, but you're adding music on top of that sandwich. Like, it's awesome.
So what is the biggest pain in the ass then? You got a band in front of you. Who is it? Is it the bass guitarist? Is it the drummer? Because drummers are a pain in the ass, aren't they?
Drummers are a pain in the backside, but do you know who are worse? Singers.
Yeah.
Singers just need tons and tons and tons of signal. There is a session already on the way, for a fact, where the one problem we had was getting manly voice to the manly voice of the band. And I was literally sending everything I could to him. Like, everything was on max. And yet, even at that point, where the gear was just punching 11 out of 10, it wasn't enough. So I had to even go right up to the amps, crank everything up. And then we just eventually realized, well, the drummer had brought in these pair of earphones. And we had the idea of swapping the headphones around for the earphones. So the singer wore the earphones. The drummer wore the expensive headphones that were meant for drummers anyway. And it all just worked out. and it was really, really strange. But then, that's the thing, because everyone has different headphones. Everyone buys Beats by Dr. Dre, let's say.
No, horrible things.
Yeah, horrible things. But they buy them. That's the thing, right? They will buy these Beat Dr. Dre things, or they'll buy these cheap Chinese earphones, or they'll buy Bluetooth wireless headphones. And
bag of shit.
Yeah, they're terrible. Like, the volume on them is going to be terrible. Either they're going to be really, really quiet and tinny and horrible, or they're going to be really loud and still very tinny and very, very annoying. But yet you bring in these consumer standard earphones into the studio and expect me to work with them, and it's just like, oh, blimmin' hell. You're taking me to the park, aren't you, boys? But the thing is, the studio isn't designed to be kind of it's kind of like a laboratory, but it's also a unique place that's meant to get a unique performance. A band can't just go in and do the same thing that they do when they're busking or when they're at a gig, because a lot of bands do busk. You've got to do something that is going to be unique, because there are things. I noticed this the other day with Slipknot, the metal band.
Yeah.
And I noticed the first time I ever really noticed them as a band, because beforehand I hated them, but the first time I really turned from my teenage ways was from listening to their Download set in 2009. And it was literally just their live set, their back to front live set, which they had done into a DVD. And I listened to it and I thought, this is actually quite good. And then I listened to the albums they did as far back as 2001. And all of a sudden, it's a completely diverse album to what I would expect from a studio album. And then I started to dig it all of a sudden, because I had the tenacity to go back from my teenage habits and actually listen to it. So
Is that your genre of music then?
Not particularly.
What are you into?
I am into everything between pop and metal, but I'm also opening myself up to work with more folk, with more jazz. As a sound engineer, for me, like, my listening habits are personal. Professionally, I have to keep myself open to everything, and I have worked with everything. I've worked with folk bands, I've worked with acoustic acts, I've worked with rock bands, I've worked with metal bands. I've even worked with, with DJs of the radio kind, performing kind. A really diverse background, as it were. But I think if you were claiming to be a sound engineer, and if you didn't have that diverse background, and if you worked with the same people over years, I can't think you can validate yourself as that. You really need to open your horizons and be willing to work with people, because you've really got to be a people person. Again, going back to my previous point about being people friendly.
So what's the big name? Have you had any big names at all that you've worked with?
The biggest name I can possibly think of working with is going to rewind all the way back. I think it wasn't so much a name, it was a location. And the location was the studio where Seth Lakeman did the bulk of his major label records from. Because I got to know, I emailed, it so happened. I didn't know this at the time, but I emailed the studio from which Seth Lakeman had done a lot of material. And I was already looking at the back catalogue, Ellie Goulding and other things like that. And I was thinking, this is a really cool place to work from. So I chose to go up there and work from there. And I did a few projects from there, mainly a live album that I did with a reggae band called King Rat and the Desperados. And that just really got the hook in me. And I think for me, that was the most unique project. Even though it was their final album, it's kind of like a farewell album. It was a very, very good farewell album.
So who would you like to work with then?
I would be able to, I think the next step for me would be to work with bands like Land of the Giants, which is, this massive band of multiple members. You got saxophones, horns, and all sorts. I mean, I have a huge respect for Andy Quick. For me to do something with him would be great. Who else could I mention?
Well, they're a big band down here in the southwest. But
yeah.
if you could do sound engineering for anybody, any band at all, who would it be?
I think I would want to work with. There is a little known band from Alabama called Gideon. They are a brilliant metalcore band from that side of the ocean, and their first two albums, Cost and Milestone, are some of the best metalcore I've heard in a while. And I'll be honest, I'm not a hardcore particular person per se. That's a whole scene, with a whole different background and everything else. But even for that, which is, which culturally is a bit outside from what I might consider myself culturally to be, it's something that I would really love to do. There's also another band I know that I would love to work for called Fit for a King. Bobby Linge, the guitarist from that band, is a great guitarist producer. He has a really great tone, and I love everything he's ever done. So
cool. Well, there you are. See, what advice would you give anybody then? I mean, that would be interested in sound engineers, just coming out of school? Because I mean, the thing is, what I have noticed is from when I was a wee whippersnapper to what I am now, you set up a band, you went to a studio, you recorded an album or whatnot. But now, so many youngsters, you're able to do it from home with a mixer, some microphones, and all that sort of jargon. If anybody would want to be interested in sound engineering, what advice would you give them?
I think you would need to have the kind of confidence to go beyond what computers can give you now. So I think, again, I go back to are you a friendly person within the music community, and are you passionate about music? That's where it comes from. It's not so much about, because I said it before, like, you could know everything about a mixing desk. You could know everything there is to know about a computer. You could even have a qualification in computer science. I know a producer recently who just graduated from computer science, even took time out from studio stuff, and he had done loads of really good stuff. And he graduated in computer science. And you could do that, and it would mean nothing. It just means more about being a good person, being passionate about music, and being passionate about bands, as well as being able to perform in music as well. I mean, I've been writing music almost as long as I've ever been interested in sound engineering. Yet I haven't released any of that yet because it has meant so much to me. But I'm now in the process of looking at that now because I think more people are going to want to know about where I come from musically, how I produce music. So I'm now in the process of creating a solo production project, which is under construction, and I'm hoping to release that. But again, the core points, if you ever wanted to start out, would be, are you passionate about people? Are you friendly with musicians? And do you have a relationship with musicians where they trust you? Because trust is a huge issue in the music scene, I think, because it's so tightly knit. Every genre has a tightly knit local scene, and it's a same group of people, listen to same different things. And if you can have a good conversation with even just one member of that scene, it will open doors. And that's what I found, is I actually went to gigs and I spoke about music and I talked about albums that I was following, and that kind of developed from that. And that's how I've been able to get the work that I do now. So
sound advice. We wasn't going to talk for very long. We're up to 43 minutes here, so we're going to have to cut it, put the nail on the head here. But it's been an absolute honour to have you in the studio, Danny, and hopefully you can come over and have a little bit of a chat to us again. I want to have a little chat to you behind the scenes, because I think there's some things that you and me could do together, which is quite exciting. But thank you very much for coming in the studio. For you guys at home that that may want to get involved, and you want to check Danny out, where can we find you again?
Like Danny Blackaller, Sound Engineer on Facebook.
Danny Blackaller, thank you very much for coming in. Absolute legend. Top sound
You're
bloke.
welcome.
Catch you soon. So that was A Favourite Things. The song was called A Little Closer. And earlier on at the beginning of this show, we had A Shoreline Dreams, Room for the Others. And thank you very much, Shauna, for sending those two lovely songs in. And if you want to find out more information about those two bands, I will put the links to the bands on my show notes. I've also got my links, which is jaff10@hotmail.com. If you want to send me an email, you can get onto my webpage, which is www.jaff10.simplesite.com. You can check me out on iTunes. You can check me out on Mixcloud. And all of those sort of ways of contacting and getting in contact with me. If you are on iTunes and you listen on iTunes, incidentally, can you please go on iTunes and leave a little comment about what you think of the show and give me some stars and all that sort of stuff? It all helps. Anyway, guys, thank you very much. Next week, we've got an amazing show, fingers crossed, lined up. We've got a chap called Carl coming into the studio, and he's going to be talking all about hairdressing and barbering and setting up a business. He's got a little shop called Lucky 13 in Callington, a little small town in Cornwall. He's doing a cracking job. He's an entrepreneur. He's a top bloke. And I think that's going to be one to look out for. But anyway, guys, thank you very much for listening to this episode 18. I hope it sounded all right. It's been blistering hot here in Cornwall. My nerves haven't been with me. I've been teasy all week. And I think it kind of shows. So I apologise. I'm going to leave you with one last thing. Look after yourself and others. And remember, your life may not be as crazy as you once thought it was.